Imagine a city at the height of its power. Markets full of noise and color, soldiers marching with confidence. Coins passing from hand to hand without hesitation. People believe tomorrow will be better than today. This is how every great empire begins its final chapter. Collapse never starts with fire or invasion. It starts quietly inside the economy, hidden behind full treasuries and confident rulers. The most shocking truth of history is that the strongest empires did not fall because they lacked resources or armies. They fell because they ignored one basic financial rule that no civilization can escape. Money is not just an object. It is not metal. It is not paper. It is trust made visible. It is a promise between the state and its people that value today will still mean value tomorrow. When that promise breaks, power becomes fragile no matter how strong it looks. Every empire that collapsed believed it had found a way around this rule. Every empire was wrong. The Roman Empire is the clearest example. Rome was not only a military giant, it was an economic machine. Roads connected continents. Trade flowed across seas. Roman coins were accepted from Britain to Egypt. The face of the emperor stamped on silver was more than decoration. It was authority itself. To accept Roman money was to accept Roman power. For centuries, this system worked because the money represented real value. Silver coins were actually silver. Gold coins were actually gold. Trust was strong because value was real. But expansion is expensive. Armies must be paid. Borders must be defended. Palaces must be built. Politicians promise comfort to the masses. Over time, spending grows faster than productivity. Leaders face a choice: reduce expenses and risk unrest, raise taxes and risk rebellion, or quietly reduce the value of money while pretending nothing has changed. Rome chose the third option. At first it seemed harmless. Coins looked the same. The stamp was unchanged. Only a small amount of silver was removed. Most people did not notice, but merchants noticed. They weighed coins, they tested metal, prices slowly rose. Soldiers demanded higher wages because their pay bought less than before. Farmers struggled because taxes were collected in coins that no longer held their old value. Inflation did not arrive like a storm. It crept in like a disease. The Roman state responded not by fixing the cause but by attacking the symptoms. Price controls were introduced. Punishments were announced. Merchants were blamed. Greed was blamed. Hoarding was blamed. Everyone was blamed except the system itself. But no law can force trust into existence. When people lose faith in money, they change behavior. They stop saving. They stop investing. They hoard goods instead of coins. Trade slows. The economy stiffens. The empire weakens from the inside. By the 3rd century, the Roman denarius contained almost no silver at all. It was money in name only. People accepted it because they had no choice, but acceptance is not trust. Once trust dies, the state must rely on force, and force is expensive. Rome still had legions, still had walls, still had banners. But the engine that powered them was failing. The collapse of Roman authority began long before barbarians reached the gates. It began when money stopped representing real value. This pattern did not belong to Rome alone. It repeated itself across civilizations separated by geography and time. Ancient China provides another powerful example. Chinese dynasties were advanced far beyond their contemporaries. They invented paper money. They developed complex bureaucracies. They managed vast populations. But again and again the same mistake appeared. Paper money was printed to cover deficits. At first it stimulated trade. Then it replaced discipline. The more money was printed, the less it was worth. Inflation followed. Farmers suffered. Soldiers were unpaid in real terms. Revolts erupted. Dynasties collapsed. New rulers promised reform. And the cycle repeated. The lesson was always the same. Money cannot be treated as a tool of convenience. It is a contract with society. Break that contract and society breaks with you. Empires forget this because power creates illusion. When leaders sit at the center of wealth and command, they begin to believe rules apply to everyone else. They assume scale will protect them. They assume control can replace trust. History proves otherwise. Before money collapses, warning signs appear. Prices rise faster than wages. Taxes increase but services decline. Debt grows while productivity stagnates. Leaders deny problems and celebrate growth using numbers that hide reality. Citizens feel pressure but cannot explain it. They sense something is wrong but life continues. This is the most dangerous phase. Collapse feels impossible because yesterday still looks stable. In Rome, this phase lasted generations. People adapted. They survived. They blamed neighbors. They blamed merchants. They blamed foreigners. But the root cause remained untouched. The financial rule was ignored again and again. Money must represent real value. Once it becomes fiction, everything built on it becomes fiction too. Empires fall when money stops being honest. Not honest in words, but honest in substance, honest in effort, honest in limits. Real value requires work. It requires production. It requires restraint. Empires fail because restraint is unpopular. Leaders choose short-term stability over long-term survival. Printing money is easier than reform. Borrowing is easier than restructuring. Blaming others is easier than accepting limits. The shocking part is not that ancient empires failed. The shocking part is how predictable their failure was. The pattern is so clear that it reads like a script. First expansion, then excess, then currency manipulation, then inflation, then social tension, then collapse. Change the names. Change the era. The rule remains. People often imagine collapse as dramatic. Fires, invasions, revolutions, but history shows something different. Collapse feels boring at first. It feels administrative. It feels economic. It feels like paperwork and numbers. It feels like prices that no longer make sense. It feels like working harder to afford less. It feels like promises that no longer deliver. By the time collapse becomes visible, it is already irreversible. Trust once broken cannot be ordered back into existence. Confidence once lost does not return easily. The Roman Empire tried everything except the one thing that mattered. Restore honest money, restore discipline, restore trust. Without that, nothing else mattered. Part 1 of this story is not about ancient coins. It is about human behavior, power blinds. Abundance creates arrogance. Shortcuts replace principles. Every empire believes it has discovered a smarter way. Every empire believes history is outdated. History does not care. The one financial rule every empire ignored before collapse was never complex. It was never secret. It was never hidden. Money must reflect real value and real limits. Break that rule and no army, no wall, no law can save you. This is where the story truly begins. As ancient empires faded, many believed humanity had learned its lesson. New systems emerged. New institutions formed. New languages of finance replaced old coins and scrolls. But the rule did not change. Only the disguise did. In the medieval and early modern world, power shifted from emperors to crowns, from city-states to kingdoms, and from swords to trade. Yet every rising empire eventually faced the same temptation. Easy money instead of disciplined value. Spain in the 16th century appeared unstoppable. It controlled oceans, it ruled colonies. It possessed mountains of silver and rivers of gold flowing from the Americas. Never before had an empire experienced such sudden and overwhelming wealth. To Spain, it felt like divine favor. Gold arrived not through labor or innovation, but through conquest. This created a dangerous illusion. Leaders began to believe wealth itself was power, independent of productivity or restraint. Instead of investing in local industry, Spain imported goods. Instead of strengthening economic foundations, it financed wars across Europe. Money arrived faster than wisdom. Prices began to rise. Bread cost more. Land became expensive. Wages could not keep up. Inflation slowly poisoned daily life. Silver that once meant prosperity now meant instability. Despite oceans of treasure, Spain declared bankruptcy multiple times. The empire collapsed under debt while sitting on unimaginable wealth. The lesson was brutal and clear. Money without productivity destroys economies. Wealth that does not come from value creation weakens discipline. Spain ignored the rule because abundance blinded it. Leaders believed quantity could replace quality. They were wrong. Gold could not compensate for a hollow economic structure. The empire did not fall because it lacked resources. It fell because it misunderstood money itself. Across the Mediterranean, the Ottoman Empire faced a similar fate. For centuries, it dominated trade routes connecting east and west. It controlled cities that shaped global commerce. But as global trade shifted and new routes emerged, Ottoman revenues declined. Instead of adapting, the state debased its currency. Coins lost weight, trust eroded, Taxes increased, corruption spread. Economic pressure crushed ordinary people while elites remained insulated. Once again, rulers chose convenience over discipline. As confidence collapsed, social cohesion weakened. Merchants lost faith, farmers resisted taxes. Soldiers demanded higher pay. The state responded with force rather than reform. History repeated itself. Economic decay preceded political decline. The empire did not collapse in one moment. It slowly bled trust until nothing remained to hold it together. France before the revolution offers another powerful warning. The French crown lived in luxury while the population struggled. Lavish courts consumed resources. Endless wars drained treasuries. Debt piled higher with every generation. The state borrowed not to invest but to survive. Promises replaced productivity. Paper claims replaced real value. Eventually the system broke under its own weight. Taxes fell hardest on those who could least afford them. Bread prices soared. Hunger became political. Trust vanished. When people no longer believe in money, they stop believing in authority. The French Revolution was not born from ideology alone. It was born from economic collapse disguised as governance. The same rule appeared again and again. Whenever rulers treated money as infinite, collapse followed. Whenever leaders believed accounting tricks could replace value creation, society paid the price. Money is not wealth. Money is a representation of wealth. Confusing the two has destroyed more empires than any invasion. Even smaller states were not immune. City-states rose and fell based on trade and finance. When trade thrived and money reflected real goods, stability followed. When speculation replaced production, collapse arrived. The medieval world was filled with experiments in finance. Some succeeded temporarily, none escaped the rule. As banking systems developed, debt became a powerful tool. Used wisely, it accelerated growth. Used recklessly, it magnified collapse. Many empires borrowed against future productivity that never arrived. Interest replaced innovation. Servicing debt consumed resources that could have built resilience. The illusion of growth masked structural decay. The most dangerous phase always looked prosperous. Construction boomed. Palaces expanded. Armies marched. Markets buzzed. Yet beneath the surface, value creation stagnated. This false prosperity seduced rulers into complacency. They believed success proved their methods correct. History shows the opposite. Excess is often a warning, not a reward. Another crucial pattern emerges in every collapse. Inequality grows. When money loses value, those closest to power protect themselves first. Assets rise. Wages lag. The gap widens. Social trust fractures. People feel the system no longer serves them. Stability requires belief that effort leads to reward. When that belief dies, unrest follows. Empires often blamed external enemies, foreign traders, religious minorities, neighboring states. But collapse was rarely imported. It was produced internally. Monetary decay eroded loyalty. Economic pressure dissolved unity. By the time enemies arrived, the empire was already hollow. What makes this story unsettling is its repetition. Different languages, different currencies, different eras, the same outcome. Human psychology does not change as fast as technology. Power still tempts leaders to bypass limits. Short-term survival still outweighs long-term stability. Money remains the easiest lever to pull. The financial rule ignored by every collapsing empire was not complex policy. It was moral discipline expressed economically. Value must come from production. Money must be honest. Growth must have limits. When leaders abandon these principles, collapse becomes a matter of time. History does not punish empires for being ambitious. It punishes them for being dishonest. Honest money demands restraint. It demands patience. It demands accountability. These qualities are politically uncomfortable. They require leaders to say no. Empires prefer yes. Yes to spending. Yes to expansion. Yes to delay. By the time reform becomes unavoidable, trust is already gone. People no longer believe promises. Markets no longer respond. Stability evaporates. Collapse becomes unstoppable, not because solutions do not exist, but because belief no longer does. This story reveals a painful truth. Knowledge of past failures did not prevent future ones. Empires read history and repeated it anyway. The rule was known, the warnings were clear, the temptation was stronger, The stage was now set for the modern era. Technology would advance. Systems would become abstract. Money would become numbers on screens. Many believed this time would be different. History was about to test that belief. And it would do so without mercy. By the time humanity entered the modern age, many believed the ancient rule no longer applied. Empires were no longer ruled by emperors wearing crowns. Money was no longer silver weighed by hand. Armies were no longer paid in coins. Technology had advanced. Institutions had formed. Economists spoke in complex language. Governments promised control. The belief spread that history had been defeated, that collapse belonged to the past, that modern systems were smarter, stronger, and safer. This belief itself became the most dangerous illusion of all. Modern empires do not fall loudly. They fall quietly through confidence. The battlefield is no longer land. It is belief. Money today is invisible. It exists as numbers on screens. It moves faster than thought. This abstraction makes it powerful and fragile at the same time. When money becomes disconnected from physical reality, the temptation to manipulate it increases. Printing no longer requires metal or ink, it requires permission. And permission is political. The same rule remains untouched. Money must represent real value, real work, real limits. Break this rule and the outcome does not change. Only the speed changes. In the modern world, debt replaced conquest as the primary tool of expansion. Governments discovered they could borrow from the future to fund the present. At first, this appeared revolutionary. Infrastructure expanded. Standards of living rose. Consumption increased. Everything looked like progress. But borrowing without discipline carries a hidden cost. Debt demands productivity tomorrow. When tomorrow fails to deliver, the system begins to strain. Instead of slowing down, modern states accelerated. They borrowed more to cover previous borrowing. They printed money to support debt markets. They promised growth to justify expansion. The language changed, but the behavior remained ancient. Convenience replaced restraint. Stability was delayed rather than secured. The most dangerous moment in any empire is when financial tools are used to hide weakness rather than fix it. Inflation becomes invisible when wages rise slowly. Asset prices soar, creating the illusion of wealth. Inequality expands silently. Those closest to financial systems benefit first. Those dependent on wages feel pressure but struggle to explain why. Trust erodes gradually. Modern citizens are told inflation is temporary, that debt is manageable, that growth will solve everything. These assurances echo the promises of ancient rulers who stamped weaker coins and blamed merchants. The language has evolved. The logic has not. One of the most unsettling patterns of history is denial. Empires do not collapse because leaders are ignorant. They collapse because leaders refuse to accept limits. Limits are politically dangerous. Limits require sacrifice. Limits demand truth. Truth is uncomfortable when power depends on confidence. As money becomes more abstract, belief becomes more critical. Once belief breaks, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Confidence cannot be commanded, it must be earned. Modern systems rely entirely on trust. Trust that currency will retain value. Trust that savings represent future security. Trust that work will be rewarded. When that trust weakens, the entire structure shakes. History shows that collapse rarely arrives without warning. Signs appear everywhere. Rising prices without matching productivity, increasing dependence on debt, growing distance between financial markets and everyday life, political polarization fueled by economic anxiety, declining faith in institutions. Each sign alone seems manageable. Together, they form a pattern that history recognizes immediately. Every empire believed it could manage decline through control, through regulation, through authority, through narrative. But no empire ever controlled its way out of financial dishonesty. Control without trust accelerates collapse. People comply until they cannot. Markets function until they break. Systems appear stable until confidence vanishes. The most shocking truth of all is how normal collapse feels from inside. Life continues. Shops open. People work. News cycles distract. Numbers grow. Then suddenly they do not. The moment of realization arrives too late. The system has already passed the point of recovery. Empires do not fall because money disappears. They fall because money stops working. It stops coordinating effort. It stops rewarding productivity. It stops representing reality. When money lies, society fractures. People turn inward. Cooperation declines. Survival replaces progress. Modern leaders often argue that innovation will save them, that technology changes rules, that digital systems create flexibility. But technology amplifies human behavior. It does not correct it. If discipline is absent, technology magnifies instability. Faster money moves, faster collapse follows. The ancient rule ignored by every empire was not economic theory, it was humility. The understanding that value cannot be created by decree, that prosperity must be earned continuously, that shortcuts always extract a future cost. Every empire believed it could delay that cost indefinitely. None succeeded. What makes the modern era uniquely dangerous is scale. Ancient collapses were regional. Modern systems are global. When trust breaks, it spreads instantly. Markets react in seconds. Confidence evaporates across borders. The consequences are amplified beyond anything history has seen. Yet the rule remains unchanged. Money must reflect real value. Productivity must justify growth. Debt must remain limited. Honesty must anchor policy. These principles are boring. They are slow. They are unpopular. They are also the only path to survival. History does not care about intentions. It does not reward complexity. It responds only to reality. Empires fall not because they are evil, but because they are human. They seek comfort. They avoid pain. They postpone discipline. Eventually, reality arrives without negotiation. The final stage of collapse is disbelief. People cannot accept what is happening. They search for villains. They demand solutions. They cling to promises. By the time acceptance arrives, options are gone. History does not repeat because people forget. It repeats because they hope they are different. The one financial rule every empire ignored before collapse still stands undefeated. You cannot fake value forever. You cannot escape limits. You cannot build trust on illusion. Money is not magic. It is memory. It remembers every shortcut taken. It remembers every promise broken. It remembers every delay. Empires fall silently, not with explosions, with spreadsheets, with price tags, with quiet erosion. The tragedy is not collapse itself. The tragedy is how preventable it always was. History does not predict the future. It exposes behavior. And behavior has not changed. The rule is still here, waiting.